In 1871, a doctor in Darby, Connecticut ordered an autopsy on a man who had just died. What he found in the stomach was enough arsenic to kill 3 men. Then they dug up the children. Then the second husband. 11 bodies, 1 woman, 7 years, and no one suspected a thing. The 1860s in America. The Civil War was tearing the country apart. Thousands of men were dying on battlefields from Virginia to Georgia. But there was another kind of death happening in the cities of the Northeast, quieter, more personal, and almost impossible to detect. In the 19th century, arsenic was everywhere. You could buy it at any drugstore for a few cents. It killed rats. It preserved taxidermy specimens. It was even used in cosmetics. Women applied it to their skin to achieve a pale, fashionable complexion. They called it inheritance powder because it was the easiest way to kill someone and get away with it. The symptoms of arsenic poisoning, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, looked exactly like cholera or typhoid or a dozen other common diseases of the era. Doctors rarely suspected poison. Autopsies were rare, and even if someone was suspicious, proving murder was almost impossible. This was the world Lydia Sherman lived in, and she used it to her advantage. Lydia Danbury was born on Christmas Eve, 1824, in Burlington, New Jersey. Her parents died when she was an infant. She was raised by her uncle, a farmer named John Claygay. By all accounts, her childhood was unremarkable. At 16, she found work as a tailor. At 17, she met a man named Edward Struck at a Methodist church. He was a widower with 2 children. They married soon after. The couple moved to New York City, 125th Street in the neighborhood of Yorkville. Edward worked as a police officer. Lydia kept house and raised children. Over the next 2 decades, she gave birth to 6 children of her own. For 20 years, the Strucks appeared to be a normal, respectable family. Then, in 1863, everything changed. Edward Struck was on duty when a fellow officer, a detective, was murdered. Edward wasn't at his post when it happened. He was blamed for the death. He was publicly disgraced, reprimanded, and fired from the police force. Edward fell into a deep depression. He couldn't work. He couldn't provide for his family. He spent his days sitting in the house, staring at the walls. Lydia had a decision to make. She could have him committed to an asylum. She could seek help from family or the church. Instead, she decided to, in her own words, put him out of the way, as he would never be any good. One morning in 1864, Lydia mixed a thimbleful of arsenic into her husband's oatmeal. A few grains of arsenic can kill a grown man. She used much more than that. First came the burning in his throat, then the vomiting, the excruciating abdominal pain, diarrhea, convulsions. After several hours of agony, Edward Struck was dead. The death certificate listed the cause as natural illness. No one suspected murder. Lydia had gotten away with it, and she had learned something important. It was easy. Edward's death created a new problem. Lydia was now a widow with 6 children to feed. The life insurance money wouldn't arrive for weeks, and even when it did, it wouldn't last forever. She looked at her 3 youngest children, Martha Ann, age 6, Edward Jr., age 4, William, just 9 months old. In her own words, they could do nothing for me or for themselves. Within 6 weeks of Edward's death, all 3 of her youngest children were dead. Martha Ann, 6 years old, arsenic in her food. Edward Jr., 4 years old, arsenic in his milk. William, 9 months old, arsenic in his bottle. The doctors wrote, typhoid fever on the death certificates. No one suspected a thing. Over the next year, 3 more of her children died of mysterious illnesses. By 1866, Lydia Sherman had killed her husband and 6 of her own children. And she was just getting started. With her children gone, Lydia needed a new source of income. In 1867, she found work as a nurse in Stratford, Connecticut. That's where she met Dennis Hurlburt. He was a wealthy farmer and fisherman, a recent widower. The locals called him Old Hurlburt because of his age. He was also worth a small fortune, at least $30,000 in cash and real estate. In today's money, that's nearly $750,000. Lydia was charming, attentive. She showed him public affection to avoid any suspicion that she was only interested in his money. They married in 1868. Dennis changed his will, leaving everything to his new wife. Dennis Hurlburt began complaining of aches and pains. He was getting old. Things hurt. Lydia decided to put him out of his suffering. She mixed arsenic into his clam chowder. 3 excruciating days later, Dennis Hurlburt was dead. Lydia inherited everything: $10,000 in cash, $20,000 in real estate. She had now killed 8 people. She was 44 years old, and she was rich. The money didn't last. Lydia spent freely, and within 2 years, most of the fortune was gone. In April 1870, she took a job as housekeeper to a man named Horatio Nelson Sherman. Horatio was a factory mechanic in Darby, Connecticut, a recent widower with 2 children, a teenage daughter named Ada, and an infant son named Frankie. He also had a drinking problem. Within months, Lydia and Horatio were married. She moved into his house in Darby. The baby, Frankie, was sickly. He cried often. One night, Horatio, drunk, said out loud that he wished the child would die to end his suffering. Lydia took the hint. She mixed arsenic into the baby's milk. He died quickly. A month later, Ada caught the flu. Lydia nursed her. Ada died within days. Horatio was devastated by the loss of his children. He went on a week-long drinking binge. Lydia was tired of his alcoholism, tired of watching him spend what remained of her money. On May 12, 1871, she spiked his brandy with arsenic. Horatio Sherman was dead within days. But this time, something was different. A local physician named Dr. Beardsley found Horatio's death suspicious. The symptoms, the timing, the fact that his entire family had died within months. Dr. Beardsley ordered an autopsy. Professor George Frederick Barker, a chemist from Yale, examined the stomach contents. He found enough arsenic to kill 3 men. They exhumed the children, Ada and Frankie Sherman, arsenic. They exhumed Dennis Hurlburt, arsenic. Lydia fled to New Jersey, but in June 1871, police tracked her down in New Brunswick and arrested her for the murder of Horatio Sherman. The trial began on April 16, 1872, in New Haven, Connecticut. It lasted 8 days. Lydia appeared in court wearing a black dress, a shawl, gloves, and a straw hat with a thin veil. She claimed her innocence. Reporters described her as stoic and indifferent, even as evidence of her murders was presented to the jury. The jury convicted her of second-degree murder, not first-degree, despite overwhelming evidence. Why? Because in 1872, juries were reluctant to sentence a woman to death, even one who had killed 11 people. On January 11th, 1873, Judge Sanford sentenced Lydia Sherman to life in prison at Wethersfield State Prison. While awaiting sentencing, Lydia made a full confession. It was published as a book, The Poison Fiend: Life, Crimes, and Conviction of Lydia Sherman. In it, she admitted to poisoning her 3 husbands and 4 children. The real number was 11. In June 1877, after 5 years in prison, Lydia escaped. She had spent months pretending to be gravely ill, even darkening her skin with yellow crayons to appear sickly. When a careless matron left her unattended, she slipped away. She made her way to Providence, Rhode Island, got a job as a housekeeper to a wealthy widower. History was about to repeat itself. But within a week, she was caught. She had given the hotel proprietor's wife 2 different names. Someone became suspicious. On May 16, 1878, Lydia Sherman died in Wethersfield State Prison. The cause of death was cancer. Unlike her victims, no one gave her arsenic to ease her suffering. Between 1864 and 1871, Lydia Sherman killed at least 11 people, 3 husbands, 8 children, 6 of them her own. She wasn't driven by passion or rage. She killed for convenience, for money, because the people in her life had become burdens. She lived in an era when poison was easy to buy, symptoms were easy to fake, and women were rarely suspected of murder. Arsenic was called inheritance powder for a reason. In the 19th century, it was the weapon of choice for those who wanted to kill quietly, patiently, without suspicion. Lydia Sherman wasn't the only one. She wasn't even the most prolific, but she was one of the most cold-blooded. Next time on the Murder Gazette, a midwife in New York, a baby farm, and dozens of infants who simply vanished. Amelia Dyer, the baby butcher,